Today we get a story of a big oopsie spaghetti-o moment on Zoom class. I mean, you guys can read the title. You kind of already know what we're going to get into. Subscribe if you like stories, and let's call the subscriber who sent in today's story. Let's call this guy Andy. So one day, Andy was in Zoom class, and this happened a little while ago when Zoom classes were still going on, but this was like one of the last few weeks of Zoom class that Andy ever had. So during the very beginning of class, when Andy logs in and he's just sitting on his computer, preparing to kind of just go on TikTok on his phone the entire time. I know I definitely was not the most focused in my Zoom classes, but I think you guys can probably relate to that as well. Anyways, in the very beginning of the class, there was this girl who we're just going to call like the girl, right? So there was this girl who said, hey, like, do you mind if I leave 10 minutes early, 15 minutes early from this class? I have a really important event I need to go to. I'm so sorry. Like, I'll make up the work. Trust me. And the teacher's like, it's no problem at all. Like, it's totally fine. If there's anything you missed that I think is like super important, I'll make sure to email it to you. Like, don't worry about that. Like, you're totally fine. So anyways, right, Andy's sitting in class. He's just kind of on his phone. Maybe he's playing like, I don't know, like Algario or something on, or like some kind of like Minecraft on his computer while on the Zoom class. But for some reason, right, he just kind of like goes back into the Zoom class. It's kind of just sitting there, kind of just bored watching the Zoom meeting. It's just like, all right, what's going on here? Like, are we almost done? And Andy notices that, it's almost time for the girl to go. And he's like, oh, okay, cool, like whatever. He doesn't really think anything of it, because why would you think anything of it? Like, she just has to leave the class early. Well, that was not exactly the case. So Andy notices the girl, like around the time, the 10-15 minute mark, whenever she said she was going to go, Andy notices the girl kind of like look up into the Zoom camera, do a very big wave, kind of like to say goodbye if the teacher was looking, and just kind of indicate that she was leaving. The teacher doesn't really pay attention as he continues on with his Zoom lesson, whatever, right? And, the girl, it seems like she thinks that she leaves the meeting. However, right, Andy notices that her camera is still going. There's no audio, there's no nothing, but the camera is still going. And it looks like the girl is acting as if she thinks that she has just exited out of the Zoom class. Because immediately, right, she gets up and she runs off to, off camera, presumably to her closet, because the girl was wearing like really informal sweats, whatever. I mean, I wasn't dressing up in like my avatar. I wasn't dressing up in a suit to go to my Zoom classes. I definitely know that. So Andy assumed like, oh, she probably has to change. And then Andy was kind of sitting there thinking about it for a second and was like, wait a minute, her camera's on and she has to change. Oh no. So immediately Andy thinks to himself, like, what do I do? Do I like message her? Do I say something and draw attention to it? I got to do something, and I got to do something quickly. Because at this point, right, the girl has returned, kind of like sitting back. She didn't sit down because she isn't on the Zoom meeting, but she's like standing in line of the camera so everyone can see. And she very obviously has whatever clothes she's about to change into her hand. And Andy has to think quick on his feet, because the problem is, right, she seems to be in a rush. She seems to be kind of like rushing around trying to change as quickly as possible. And Andy was like, all right, I probably got like 10 seconds before like it hits the fan, dude. So let's just call this Sarah. Let's just call the girl Sarah for the sake of the story, because Andy unmutes his mic as he's been muted and has his camera off the entire time. He unmutes his mic and he says, Sarah, like, your video is still going, right? And this was, it was a good effort, valiant effort. However, the problem was, right, for some reason, Sarah, while her video was going, her audio must have been off, and because she still had no idea that she was on the Zoom call, and she couldn't hear when Andy said, Sarah, your camera's on. So at this point, right, the only thing that Andy just did was he didn't alert Sarah that, that her camera was on. All Andy did was alert everybody that Sarah's camera was still on. And the moment of truth eventually came. So sure enough, right, she was in a hurry to change into like the new outfit to like whatever event she was going to. So sure enough, right, she really quickly changes. And I don't know how else to say it, but like, I mean, you guys can read the title of the video. I'm assuming I'm going to title it that unless YouTube gets mad at me and I have to change the title. But she completely changes. To put it in YouTube-friendly terms, for a brief, like, maybe 1 to 2 seconds, there was literally nothing left to the imagination, and then all of a sudden she was in the clothes that she wanted to change into. I just spent like 30 seconds explaining like how people change clothes, but you gotta understand, I gotta talk around what happens sometimes, especially if I want to tell a story that's super interesting, but also a little bit, YouTube angry. I don't know how else to say it, but anyways, so at this point, Andy has just directed everyone's attention in the class to what just happened. And, seconds later, they all just saw what just happened. Unfortunately, right, the teacher was not aware of what was happening until it was, like, way too late. So the teacher, like, when Andy said, like, "Oh, Sarah, your camera's still on," the teacher, like, noticed that someone was speaking and was like, "Oh, did someone ask a question?" And as he was saying that, that's when he was like, he looked at his screen again and he noticed what happened on the screen with, like, Sarah. And just out of pure, like, panic, he just turned off the entire Zoom class. So Andy was sitting there and it just said the whole thing like stopped and it said the host has ended the meeting. And Andy was just like, "Oh, what just happened?" So not so shortly after, Andy gets an email from the teacher saying, "Hey guys, sorry to end class early. There were technical difficulties." He's really just trying to play it off as if, something just didn't happen in class, which honestly, kind of like low-key respect to the teacher for doing that, because like he's trying to like draw the least amount of attention to that situation, which I 100% understand, and I can respect that. But anyways, right, the next day, Andy comes into class. He comes into class, aka he logs into the Zoom meeting, right? And when he logged into Zoom class, right, everyone logged in, including the girl, which I forgot the name I gave her, and the teacher just started teaching like normal the next day. And, Andy was like, "Oh, like, we're just gonna pretend like nothing happened." But, yeah, apparently, like, the teacher, like, had, like, sent an email to the girl after class being like, "Hey, I just want to let you know I ended the class early because your webcam was still going, and I'm not 100% sure what people saw, but I just want to let you know, like, next time you gotta be really careful when you exit the Zoom class to make sure that you actually exited the Zoom class, right? You gotta make sure that you're actually out of there." And, so let's just say that everyone in that class, Andy included, whenever they left a Zoom class from that point on, they didn't just double check. They triple checked to make sure that their cameras were like legitimately off and not half off or fake off or just on the entire time because of that whole incident. And Andy will never forget that day for the rest of his life. Leave a like for free nothing if you haven't already. And peace. Click on the video on screen right now. I know you'll enjoy it. Just click it. Do it.